they're still concerned.
Sean Waddell, lawyer for ICE employees, sending a cease and desist letter after weeks of protests in which the building that houses ICE was shut down. ICE employees say they were harassed and threatened, even denied police assistance. The mayor's office, as its legal counsel, is reviewing the cease and desist letter.
A noted Canadian educator and author says many colleges and universities have become nothing more than liberal indoctrination centers and training grounds for political activism. Clinical psychologist and University of Toronto Professor Jordan Peterson called out colleges for teaching pseudo-disciplines on Fox and Friends today and said they made a dreadful mistake by legitimizing imitation majors.
Disciplines like women's studies and these ethnic studies disciplines, which aren't disciplines. They're pseudo-disciplines at best, and they have very, very low academic standards, and they're corrupting the rest of the enterprise. You need to have standards in education, and the fact that disciplines emerged that had no real methodology and no method of proof, no philosophical background, no real history, meant that they became degree-granting enterprises, and that they emerged to produce political activists, which is exactly what they advertise on their websites. Means that you've got a fifth column of ideologues operating behind the scenes.
Christian groups hoping to see a more LGBT welcoming and affirming church met in St. Louis last week. Several evangelical voices were among those putting on the Revoice Conference.
The theme of the conference was supporting, encouraging, and empowering gay, lesbian, same-sex attracted, and other LGBT Christians so they can flourish while observing the historic Christian doctrine of marriage and sexuality. Of course, that doctrine mandates any sexual expression outside a monogamous man-woman marriage is sin. AFR's Janet Mefford says that made the conference almost nonsensical.
They talk about celibacy in the historic Christian tradition, but then you look on their website and everything was about queer culture and intersectionality and all these liberal progressive things, and it just got weirder and weirder.
One of the organizers of the conference was Nate Collins, who claims the title of gay Christian married to a woman. In his keynote address, he stressed the difficulties gay men and lesbians have in the church.
It's exhausting to live in the darkness of rejection. It's exhausting to constantly be defined by others or by a warped understanding of how and who you love.
Everything was about we're victims, we're martyrs. The church has been terrible to us. Have you never heard of the Main Line? Because the Episcopal Church, the United Church of Christ, the PCUSA would all be thrilled to have you. They would embrace your gayness, and they would be all rainbow flaggy with you.
She says with gay activists, it always seems to be about changing the conservative church because the root of the problem is that they're angry at God himself. I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Both the Prime Minister and I are focused on the urgent need to protect our nations from terrorism and uncontrolled migration. Our countries have learned through hard experience that border security is national security. They are one and the same. Like the United States, Italy is currently under enormous strain as a result of illegal immigration, and they fought it hard. And the Prime Minister, frankly, is with us today because of illegal immigration. Italy got tired of it. They didn't want it any longer. The people of Italy have borne a great part of the burden for Europe through the course of the migration crisis. I applaud the Prime Minister for his bold leadership, truly bold, and I hope more leaders will follow this example, including leaders in Europe. The Prime Minister and I are united in our conviction that strong nations must have strong borders. We have a solemn obligation to protect our citizens and their quality of life.
Yeah, we do.
And that was President Donald Trump, and he was talking about, he was actually at a press conference there at the White House with the Prime Minister of Italy, and they were they took only 2 questions each, and, that's because our media has really made it a spectacle, and really it's embarrassing the way they behave in front of our foreign counterparts. But it was an interesting moment for the president because he was able to connect an issue that was the signature issue of his campaign, and it's something that he's been working through as president, to the primary goals of another world leader. And I thought that was super important. So welcome to the program. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right, here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, AFR.net, urbanfamilytalk.com, urbanfamilytalk.com, where you can find out more about what we do, the ministry, the work, and the hosts that are on both networks. And it's good to be with you today. So I'd love to just run down what we're going to talk about. Obviously, we're going to get into some immigration chats. And, this is one of those things where I'm going to have to get a little bit real and admit that I hadn't actually read Adios America by Ann Coulter. And you know how we like to do. We Washingtons love to listen to a good audio CD or audio book on Audible on the way home from, a trip. And so last week we were on vacation, and on the way back, we listened to the majority of Ann Coulter's book, Adios America. So if let's say you just never get angry. I know, but let's be hypothetical here. If you never get angry and you want to get angry, that's the audio book to listen to. So we're going to delve into a little bit of that. We're going to speak with Walter Myers III. He's a political commentator and adjunct lecturer for the Master's Degree in Science and Religion program at Biola University. He's going to come on today and talk with us about news of the day. And then we also have Brittany Hughes, the Brittany Hughes of Media Research Center TV. She's going to join the program. And she's got a fascinating look at this. You know what I love? I love it when the socialist Democrats get to talking about facts and figures and numbers, because that's when they're at their worst. Honestly, Ocasio-Cortez should just stop using numbers in her speeches, because every number she quotes is so demonstrably false that it becomes mock-worthy. Now, we're very serious about our political information here at Stacey on the Right. So when I say mock-worthy, I mean you're not even able to salvage it. Like, the numbers she's quoting aren't salvageable. So just to give you a little taste, Ocasio-Cortez says that 200 million Americans work in America today and earn less than $20,000. Well, the total American workforce is comprised of 155 million Americans. So 200 million Americans cannot work for $20,000 a year because there aren't 200 million Americans working in America. That's first off. So we're going to dig into those numbers with Brittany Hughes, who is fantastic. She does great work over there, especially her video. She does video series over there that's really, really popular and excellent. And so we'll be talking to her about that in hour 2. And then we have some audio from Lindsey Graham at the close of the show, where he's talking about how proud he is of President Trump on the way he's been moving, but he has some suggestions for him on China and trade rules, and how China is actually muddying up the works between America and North Korea. We really need our discussions with North Korea to go well and to continue to move forward. And North Korea is kind of beholden to China, and China is gumming up the works because they don't like what we're doing with them on our intellectual property and our trade. So they are kind of saying, look, if you're not going to be our friend the way we want you to be our friend, you're not going to be able to be friends with North Korea because we own them and we get to tell them what to do. So Lindsey Graham has some advice for President Trump on that. So back to President Trump at the Oval Office having this press conference. And here's a little side story for you. Jim Acosta of CNN was actually in the room as usual. He has a standing press pass. He has a hard pass, what they call a hard pass, which means he doesn't have to have one issued to him. Like, if I want to go to the briefing room, I have to go through the proper channels and they'll issue me a pass. My pass will be for a certain number of days or even hours. It will only get me into the press room. I can't just, go to the White House and stroll around. Even on the tour, you're limited to where you can go. But Jim Acosta has been a member of the White House press corps for a number of years, and so he has a hard pass. Hard pass holders have access to other hallways. They can actually go and kind of hang out in certain areas where they would bump into staffers and ask staffers for comments on things. And they're well known within the environs of the White House. So it's an interesting difference between, obviously Jim Acosta is a seasoned reporter and he's been around for quite a while. And they like to have people who have that kind of knowledge base to be the ones that are hard pass holders for organizations like CNN and MSNBC and the big news types. They want to have those people in there because you're supposed to, in the course of your work, this is almost any job, but especially for reporters, you build up relationships. And even when it's a little adversarial, as it is with Jim Acosta, there's still that mutual respect that comes from the fact that he's just been in that space for a number of years. And that's why he swans around, and sometimes he doesn't even bring his hard pass. And he's been told by Secret Service, remember that was a couple months ago, earlier in the summer, he was trying to just stroll around, and one of the Secret Service agents was like, I need your hard pass. Hard pass holders go this direction. He said, I'm a hard pass holder. Don't you know I'm Jim Acosta? And she said, actually, sir, I don't know. He said, what are you new? She said, I'm new here, and you need a hard pass to enter this hallway. And he said, I will definitely I'll retrieve it and I'll bring it, and she said, every time you're in this space, you need to have your hard pass available for inspection. It was pretty stunning because he was trying to dress her down, and she went ahead and dressed him back down because she really was unaware of who he was, which just goes to kind of show you that he's pompous like that all the time. It's not just on TV. So when this was going on, there were two questions from each side, and Jim Acosta is there and he's doing his thing. And at the end, no one asked about the collusion, yada, yada, yada. So he starts yelling out questions. Well, when the White House staffers announce that they want you to exit the room, it's because it's not really about you. It's about the schedule of the president. The president has a number of items on his schedule every day. And in order to accommodate a number of moving parts, just gobs of stuff that has to go on that he has to be a part of, and things that have to go on and move around him, he has to be kept on a tight schedule. And he can't do that himself. The staffers are there for that purpose. So the staffers used to, I've heard them in the background. If you watch enough video as I do, you'll hear the staffers in the background say, okay, that's it, folks. No more questions. Let's move out. In other words, it's time to clear the Oval Office, because at that point, they may continue their discussion alone together, the two world leaders, or the other world leader, the visitor, might need to leave to catch their flight back to Europe or whatever. Whatever the case is, it's really not their job to decide whether it's time for them to go. They are guests in the White House. They have a right to be there because they're press and they have passes. But when it's time to exit the Oval Office, they should do so post haste. Now, they're allowed to linger a little bit and gather their things because a lot of them have heavy equipment, cameras, etc. But for the most part, Jim Acosta, who strolls around unimpeded with just, whatever notes he's taking, it doesn't take him long to turn around and start exiting. But they've taken to not listening to the staffers. So the staffers have taken to yelling. And then they get mad because they're being yelled at. And then the staffers have to yell some more because they're ignoring the staffers because they don't want to be yelled at. And the staffers have to yell louder to make sure that they're heard because you have to leave the room. Well, that's what happened. The staffer was right next to Jim Acosta when she said, okay, folks, that's it. Thanks for being here. Let's move. Let's move. And then everyone starts turning really slowly like mini Titanics. Like they can't just turn around and walk out. Jim Acosta starts shouting questions. He's been told it's over and it's time to go. He starts shouting questions. Now, you got to give respect to reporters for shouting out questions because it's like that. I guess that's their job. So then he starts doing that and she's right next to him. So she shouts back, Jim, it's time to go. Let's move. And you can hear it on the audio. Like you can hear it and see it in the video. And so he complains about it on CNN later. And my question is, what about let's go, it's time to leave? Did he not understand? Drama queen. Seriously. So the story is always about him. Have you noticed that? He's always making the news and it's always Jim Acosta news instead of him reporting on actual news because he's asking questions that are substantial and really primed for an answer. Because one thing I've noticed about Donald Trump is that he loves a good question that he can answer and get information out. So, yes, they're going to ask about the collusion and all of that. But if that's the only thing they're going to ask about, of course, they're not going to get called on because the president needs to get other information out there besides the witch hunt Mueller investigation. Yeah, I said it. What y'all going to do? What all y'all haters out there, what you going to do? Nothing but keep watching. So now we're back to the president's audio. He was talking about Italy's illegal immigration problem. He compared it to our own. And then he said he would have no problem with actually having a government shutdown over border security in response to a question from a reporter who was wondering where he stood on that, because there's an opportunity coming up for the president to actually dig in his heels and require that border funding and the wall for the extra judges that we need, all of the different things that he's outlined. There's time for him to actually put his foot down and say, I'm not going to sign anything unless it has what I need in it. And Donald Trump explained his thinking on that. It's number 7.
My administration is working hard to pass border security legislation, improve vetting, and establish a merit-based immigration system, which the United States needs very, very importantly, very badly. As far as the border is concerned, and personally, if we don't get border security, after many, many years of talk within the United States, I would have no problem doing a shutdown. It's time we had proper border security. We're the laughing stock of the world. We have the worst immigration laws anywhere in the world. In our meeting today, the Prime Minister and I discussed ways to enhance our cooperation in the fight against terrorism. That also has to do with border security.
So it does. It has to do with border security. And I think, you know, you've got the president and you've got the issue that we don't have Republicans or Democrats as a majority who are willing to simply admit that our immigration is broken. And I don't mean broken like when Democrats and kind of Chamber of Commerce Republicans, establishment Republicans, but it depends on what you want to call them, but people who are pro-illegal immigration because they want cheap labor, when those people say they want immigration reform, they don't mean they want to reform the system so that it works for Americans. They mean they want to continue the flow of illegal labor because it depresses wages. So for people who are currently, if you're in a state like here in Missouri, we have right to work up on the ballot on next week in our primary election. And what's so annoying about this is that people are lying, saying that right to work depresses wages. You know what really depresses wages? Illegal immigration. They're the same people who want you to be forced to pay union dues that go to the Democrats are the same people who want illegal aliens replacing you and the workplace. And it's not just them replacing you in the workplace. Illegal aliens accounted for 45% of the crimes in Texas in one calendar year. Over 645,000 illegal aliens in prison for committing crimes. Yes, that's what I said. So when you see people talking about criminal justice reform and how America incarcerates way too many people, way more people than any other developed nation on the earth, because we have more Nigerians living in our country than any other country on earth besides Nigeria. We have more Mexicans living in our country than any other country on earth except for Mexico. We are becoming a magnet for people who can't make it in their own country or aren't wanted in their own country. So they're here, they're doing crimes, they're being incarcerated, they're being educated, they're on welfare, they're doing crimes here. And the Democrats are the same ones who are selling you the garbage on not giving you school choice, not giving you lower taxes, not giving you safety in your neighborhoods. And they're also selling you the garbage that you need to have illegal immigrants in your town doing all this stuff to you. Yeah, walk away. There's something wrong with that. We'll be back with Walter Myers III right after this.
You know, people often ask me, Tim, what's your favorite part of the Holy Land Tour? I've been leading Holy Land Tours for many years now. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, I learned how to lead these Israel tours from my dad, who started doing them in the 60s. And then he taught me in the 80s and 90s. And now my wife Allison and I lead these tours annually to Israel. And we love going because we love seeing people's eyes when they see things such as the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River and the Garden Tomb and the Wailing Wall. See all these things for the first time and maybe the last time in many folks' lives, because this is a bucket list trip. We're going to be going in March. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, give us a call at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5. And we'll send you a brochure. If you want to go to the website, everything's there. twholyland.com. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Recently, I spoke to a group of Christian college students. One of the students shared with me that a friend in his accountability group confessed that he continues to indulge in a particular sinful habit. He asked the group to pray that he would stop, but he refuses to get the help he needs. I told this young man, your friend is probably not serious about stopping. He enjoys his sin, and he's probably playing a game with you and the group to appease his conscience. In 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verses 17 through 19, we're reminded of the stubbornness of sin. But after the death of Jehoiada, the officials of Judah came and bowed down to the king, and the king listened to them. They abandoned the house of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols. So wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this their guilt. Yet he sent prophets to them to bring them back to the Lord. Though they testified against them, they would not listen. Here are 3 observations. 1, sin runs from accountability. It might use accountability language, but sin always runs from accountability because it doesn't want light shed on the darkness of our souls. Number 2, sin robs you of fulfilling God's purposes for life. These were leaders, and it was God's purpose for them to lead the people in a holy and godly life. But sin robs us of fulfilling God's purposes for our lives. Then number 3, sin rebels against God's warnings. It doesn't want to yield to what is right. Here's what I want you to remember and do today. If you're living in sin, please listen to me. Don't make the mistake of not taking God seriously. You are destroying yourself. Repent. Do what is right to overcome it. Do it now.
Thanks, Crawford, and thank you for listening to today's Legacy Moment, a production of Moody Radio.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us today. Yeah, it's raining here in the Midwest, and we desperately need the water for our plants. I got back, I was looking at my little, you guys, if you've been following me on Instagram, you've seen that I have this bell pepper plant that I've been getting bell peppers off of. And don't you know, even though I watered it and put water into the reserve area under the little portable, it's like a little portable garden thing on wheels so you can move it around and put it in the sun and put it in the shade, that all the water went out of it last week. And then the little bell pepper, the small babies that were coming along, a couple of those shriveled up and they're dead. They're done. The plant is fine, but I only have one bell pepper on there that's like survived the, I guess, onslaught last week, and it will continue on and grow. And then the one that I harvested that was pretty decent size, but still a little small compared to what you see at the grocery store. And so I'm feeling just like something happened last week. I was out of town. I just needed a little break. And now I'm back, and the plants are not, they're not happy. They didn't have a good time. And the dog didn't have a good time. We picked the dog up from the groomer, and he looked like he'd been through a tornado storm. He wasn't groomed. His hair wasn't cut. His ears were matted. And so we had to take him back today to get them to do the job they were supposed to do while he was with them while we were on vacation. So yeah, just the aftermath is still coming on at me pretty strong. I'm trying to handle it, people. I'm trying to handle it. All right. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome first guest of the first hour. And we have Walter Myers III, political commentator, adjunct lecturer for the Master's Degree in Science and Religion program at Biola University. Walter, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Stacey. Thanks for having me.
It's good to talk to you. So I have, of course, I thought it was fascinating, and we listened to the audio in the first segment of the president standing alongside the prime minister of Italy and commiserating with him in front of our media about the difficulties they've had with a kind of migrant invasion, if you will, and illegal immigration and the things that they've been trying to do to stem that. And he drew a parallel between what they've been working with and what the president is trying to do on our southern border. I want to have a discussion with you about how illegal immigration actually negatively impacts the black community, but Democrats are actually selling black Americans, a core constituency for them, on this idea that all immigrants are basically the equivalent of American blacks, and our legacy and things that have been created for us in government and anywhere you see a program that has to do with American blacks, it's predicated on the fact that we had slavery in this country for a long time, and therefore there are some inherent disadvantages that we're finally seeing the end of. But these programs don't exist to be applied to any person who comes here who isn't white.
Well, Stacey, I mean, as with all things, I mean, it's somewhat complicated. And I mean, what I think Democrats they have sort of recognized is since they've lost the middle, pretty much the middle of the country, they've lost the middle class people. They need to have a new constituency, and right now that new constituency is, or what their hope is that eventually they will be able to take all of the illegal. And when we talk about immigration, I always like to qualify it with we're specifically talking about illegal immigration, not legal immigration.
Absolutely.
And with respect to this, the idea here is that if you bring literally millions of people here, hopefully they will eventually take the House. Hopefully their hope is they'll take the House, they'll eventually take the Senate, and then they can eventually get legislation pushed when, I guess, Hillary Clinton wins in 2020 or Joe Biden or whoever they do decide to put up front against Trump in 2020, that person will sign legislation in place that will actually give amnesty as well as a path to citizenship for literally tens of millions of people who come here illegally. I think that really is their end game. And so if that means literally having millions of people flood the border and into the United States and get them that citizenship, I mean, that's for them. That's the price that needs to be paid. I think ultimately that will be very destructive, to our country. But I think that's really where they're going. And the idea that it's just brown people. I mean, that just to me is just a farce. It's like people who are coming. I lived in Mexico for 2.5 years. I've lived and worked in Mexico for about 2 or 3 years of my life, just going back and forth. And, I mean, in Mexico, I mean, yes, you have brown people, but there's all sorts of people there. So there's to try to make this a color thing or a race thing, this really has nothing to do with race, in my view. But that's the way they sell things these days. You have to be sensational. You have to make this about some type of identity, politics, and those types of things. And that's just basically what we hear from the Democrats. And unfortunately, we just don't have an informed enough electorate that people will really push back on some of these things that the Democrats are doing, particularly as they take us towards a socialist state. And that's even the larger, scarier issue with respect to where their party is going.
And so when you mention the socialist state and this new tendency, which, Walter, I kind of see it as the full fruition. Like this is where every seed they've ever planted is now coming and blooming and flowering, and they're seeing what they've actually sown, which is they've put socialism on par with capitalism in American public schools for at least 20 years now. They've tried to normalize Marxism, parts of Marxism. They've compared our social safety net to the socialist programs of countries that are failed, but they don't talk about the failure. So I guess how do we point that out? Because I don't think Americans are buying it. You see regular people saying, yeah, socialism, if it means Medicare, if it means they're saying if it means stuff we're already doing, that we expand that, sure. But when you start talking about true socialism, the government owning the means of production, people not having private property, then people all unanimously, Democrats, whatever, they all say, no, I don't mean that. How do we push back on people like Ocasio-Cortez, who she's got a pretty face, she's very, very marketable, but she's doing things and saying things that are they're ludicrous?
Well, I mean, again, I think it's the fact that much of the electorate is not really truly aware of what the Democrats are doing. What they hear, and it's because and largely because of the media. The media is effectively an arm of the Democratic Party, and so I think that's a huge problem. But I think also with respect to the entire sort of socialist state or where things are going, I also think that I believe that eventually Americans will get it and they will say this is not a direction that we want to go in. And I think once we start, and we need to really start to, I think and as a Republican and as a conservative first and then as a Republican, I think that we need to do a better job of communicating, particularly with the black community, is that how do we, and I try to do it in my own personal discussions. And when I have discussions with other blacks about, I don't sort of give them the Republican kind of party line. I always like to ask questions. well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this policy? Where do you think this is going? What do you think of the consequences? I think really it is incumbent upon us as Black conservatives is to have those discussions with people as much as possible. I think also it's educating ourselves more on what does socialism bring. Yes, to your point, we have had some socialistic type things. If you look at Medicare, if you look at Social Security, yes, those are actually they're socialist systems. And I think sometimes we tend to call them, say that they're not really socialist, but they really truly are socialist. So I think we need to do a better job about educating people in conversations that we have with them, not really trying to sort of score points or make political or partisan points. But I think it's really about having conversations with people in our communities to start to sort of drive a different way of people starting to view where we're going as a country. And what the Democrats are selling, I mean, it does sound good, but when you get down to brass tacks, eventually it doesn't just stop at one place. It always tends to be a progression until you get towards full-blown communism. And I think we've learned that in Venezuela. I think we've learned that in Cuba. Of course, we've learned that in Russia. That's a fully collapsed system. So I think really it's a matter of conversations and really being serious about having these conversations and having them in the right way with people that we meet on an everyday basis, without talking about sort of the partisan party type politics discussion.
Well, that's a lot harder to do than, the flame wars of the social media. So I think your point is well taken, but it's something that we have to condition ourselves to be able to do, which is, kind of get past the initial discussion, which really all of it centers around a hatred of Donald Trump. But Donald Trump won't always be the president. He hasn't always been the president, but the issues have been there since, what were we doing back when Reagan was president? He was signing amnesty. Bill Clinton was talking about sealing the border, and on and on and on it goes. But nothing's ever really been done. Nothing substantial has been done to fix the problem. And when I think there's this idea that with conservatives, Republicans, people on the right, that there's no understanding of the difference, which you made at the very beginning, but I want to just re-highlight it real quick, which is we're not against immigration. It's illegal immigration that is the problem, and it really messes everything up. So illegal immigration actually damages the cause of legal immigrants and people who are trying to reform the system so that it's more friendly and easier to navigate. But there'll never be a point at which we're ready to receive everyone who wants to come here, because that's simply impossible.
Well, I mean, and I agree with that. There are literally probably billions of people who want to come to America, and that's a wonderful thing. And we've always been a very welcoming country, and we still are a welcoming country. But I think what I have really noticed about Trump and what I love about Trump is that Trump puts America first. He puts Americans first. That doesn't mean that we don't want legal immigrants. It doesn't mean we don't want other people to come in and join in our system of government, our capitalist system, to come in and give back to our system and benefit and start companies and grow companies. I mean, that's what we want. We want the best and the brightest, but we want to be able to select those people that come in. And the idea that you're going to basically create, and what's the worst part is the idea that you can create a socialist state, basically a socialist state that has open borders, okay, and a welfare state. I mean, Milton Friedman said that's just insanity. That is never going to work. So if you're going to continue to bring across all these people, and then you're going to offer them all these benefits, and you're going to set up this socialist state, well, someone's going to have to pay for all of this stuff. And I think we've seen even today, even liberal and conservative scholars alike have looked at Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, I guess, her plan now for Medicare for all. That's $32 trillion over a 10-year period. So basically, we would have to roughly double all the tax receipts, all of the tax receipts, not just for the rich, but for everyone, to be able to pay that type of benefit. And I mean, it just makes no sense. And so, while they're out there making these types of cases, I think it's pretty clear that you cannot pay for these types of programs. And also pay without wrecking the system. And also, I think when people realize that they will lose their existing health care and that they will have no other option other than to take what the government gives them, support for these types of programs drops way off. So I think, again, it's about communicating, okay, well, if someone is going to force you to take Medicare and tell you have no other option, I don't think most American people would be accepting of that when they really know when they really understand it truly from that case.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine a 60-second or maybe 120-second video that just explains, look, it sounds wonderful, and if it would work, and in almost every government on the face of the planet would be doing it, but there is no Medicare for all, and that exists alongside of a private healthcare system that anyone can access, where you get to choose Medicare for all or choose the other option, that both of those work at the same time. And $32 trillion, I mean, I know we talk in these large numbers, and sometimes I think people just tune it out. Trillions of dollars, who even understands the magnitude of that? But if you look at our deficit and then you look at what they're proposing, this dwarfs every other program, even the vaunted military spending that the Democrats are always crowing about. There's nothing that we're spending this much money on right now. And even if there were, that would also negate the ability to pay for it. There's just no way to do it. And I know people think, well, there's an unlimited amount of money with wealthy people in this country because we have so many wealthy people. But that's not actually true either, because wealthy people know how to protect their money. And if they thought everything they own was going to be confiscated to pay for Medicare for all, they would simply leave the country. Their assets would leave first, and then they would leave. So there is no way to do this.
Yeah. But then all you're going to get from the wealthiest people is $2 trillion anyway. So that'll last you maybe for a year or two, and then it's all gone. And then you have people who are no longer producing wealth. So that's the other problem. Is like, if you're going to take away from those people that are producing the jobs, the producers, in other words, what I like to think about it, Bernie and Ocasio-Cortez, is they're the people that are going after the producers. Well, what happens once you destroy the producers? You get exactly what you get in Cuba, you get what you got in Venezuela, and of course what you got in the USSR, is that when the producers cease to be productive, there is really no wealth for you to spread around anymore. And one thing I like to do, Stacey, to sort of bring down those numbers, the trillions of dollars, is imagine you have a friend who makes $40,000 a year. Okay, they're already $2,000. Or let's say they make $35,000 a year. They're already $200,000 in debt. Okay, and they're borrowing $5,000 a year, putting on their credit card to bring that up to $40,000. I would ask that friend, well, how long do you think your friend can go at that level of borrowing in their life? And they would say, well, yeah, obviously that's something. They would have to get another job. They would have to do something. Well, if you just take that and add, I believe, 8 zeros to that, then you start looking at the trillion. So I think if you sort of compress those numbers down and look at that load of debt, a person with a $35,000 a year salary who borrows $5,000 every year, and they're already $200,000 in debt. That's effectively our federal government with respect to its debt and with respect to its deficits, but just scaled up.
Wow.
Scaled up with 8 or 9 additional zeros.
Wow. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us and for coming on the show today. Hope to have you back again soon, Walter, for your expertise and knowledge. Wonderful to talk to you today. Walter Myers III, political commentator. And Professor, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate it.
Talk to you again soon. We'll be back with more right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
How often do we minister only to those who are like-minded? When I was coaching, sometimes I'd have a coach or a player who may not have had a perfect past, and people would ask me if I really wanted them on the staff or the roster, or even if I wanted to be associated with them at all. Jesus wants us actively ministering to people who need to be ministered to, who need to know the source of that difference in our lives, and who need Jesus' healing words and His grace. How else will we show the world that we're different and we can impact those who may need it?
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. The crisis at our southern border has stymied all reasoning and thoughtful consideration of what is driving the influx of people irresponsibly dragging tiny children thousands of miles to break our border laws. Most of those arriving here illegally are claiming credible fear that they will suffer violence or reprisals in their home country. The problem with that is that just 5% of all claims made are found to meet our standards for asylum. This doesn't matter because those who are caught at the border are released into America, and 95% of them never show for their asylum hearing. The result is a marked increase in people competing for low-wage work, which disenfranchises our low-income citizens and is burdening our welfare system. Central American migrants claiming asylum have surged 800% over numbers recorded in 2012. Violence in Central America has declined by 40%. It's time that we made it clear we are closed to illegal entry into our country. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo appeared recently before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to talk to senators about President Trump's summits with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin. And senators of both parties left the hearing not knowing much more than they did before. Pompeo refused to answer many questions, and Pompeo is yet to hold a classified briefing for lawmakers about either conclave. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker of Tennessee criticized President Trump for constant oscillation between presidential comments and tweets and how they differ from established U.S. policy. He asked Pompeo if there was a strategy behind the back and forth. The Secretary of State largely didn't answer, and then sparred with Corker as to whether or not he did answer. The top Democrat on the committee, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, blasted Pompeo. He said, quote, "If President Obama did what President Trump did in Helsinki, I'd be peeling you off the Capitol ceiling." So Corker asked Pompeo if he'd like to give a response to Menendez's tongue-lashing. "Not a word," replied Pompeo. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
I miss the whole job. I love that job. I love the job of senator.
Franken was treated warmly at every turn. This young dad remembers Franken's repeated visits to the old school.
It's awesome, and we really appreciate everything he has done.
And like many on the Leech Lake Reservation, he says he'd like to see Franken return to public life. Will you run for office again?
Oh, that. See, if I say anything there, you'll put it in the story. So I don't know. I haven't ruled it out. I haven't ruled it in.
Franny Franken admits the abrupt departure from the Senate has been difficult for both of them.
It has been a challenge, but we do get to spend more time together. And I think there are times when both of us would like to spend less time.
Okay, so welcome back to the program. I'm sighing because I'm just trying to remember in my mind, and maybe you can help me, the last time a disgraced Republican received such a puff treatment from a media organization. Al Franken and his wife show up to, glad hand and present themselves as some sort of, just a couple, just a man in a suit and a woman with a dream, a woman who spends a little too much time with her husband, a woman who, she's sad because her time as a wife of a politician was abruptly brought to an end by revelations about her husband's salacious and disgusting behavior towards women. And even though it was a part of the Me Too movement and she's a hardcore Democrat and feminist herself, she just wants people to think of the better times, the times when Al Franken did good things for the people, the times when he was a man of the people and not a man who groped people. Yeah, that's what they're trying to sell. Like, who's picking up that peddled garbage? We have an opportunity to move forward without people who, like Al Franken, there was photographic evidence, so we don't have to wonder what he did to the lady. We know what he did. And there were other allegations that were made that were never substantiated. We don't know what the investigations resulted in. We don't really know anything except that women came forward. And since this is the Me Too movement and the Democrats made it, it's their baby. They've made this bed. Should they not have to be the ones to sleep in this bed? I think so. And by this bed, I mean the Me Too movement. They brought it on. So if they want to make changes to it, if they want to suddenly start to say that men are innocent until proven guilty and that men deserve due process, which I totally, that's my position. But who am I? I'm just over here on the right, being vilified for holding my own thoughts and ideas apart from the black community. Come on. This is what they wrought. Why should he be immune from the treatment? So I have to say no thanks to this news organization kind of trotting him back out for a trial run. Just keep on trotting and let him get back to wherever he was, because there's plenty of stuff he can do in the private sector. He was a comedian before. He could be a comedian again. He could do almost anything. This is America. This is America. How about that? I think it's kind of crazy that they're even trying to trot him back out again. I mean, just earlier today, I was looking at some YouTube videos, political YouTube videos, and I noticed how it was video after video of President Trump back when he was on the campaign trail, and then there were videos of President Obama making comments about this or that. And the shows that were being, the clips were on, it was like Bill O'Reilly, no longer at Fox News, and others. Eric Bolling, no longer at Fox. Now he's landed over at CRTV, I believe, and he's doing okay, but it's kind of crazy to me that others have had to kind of go off on their own and reinvent themselves and try to make a way for themselves. But the media is propping up and trying to help Democrats who've been found on the wrong side of their own movements. And we're supposed to just let that fly by? It needs to be noted. And it needs to be, you can't be the kind of person who says you believe every woman and every woman deserves to be believed, and you're just lockstep with the Me Too movement and still okay with Al Franken. Sorry, you just can't. Same thing goes for those same people who are acting in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. I don't know if you, news story, fresh out, still hot. The Guardians of the Galaxy executive director. So he directed the films, the two movies that we've seen, the Guardians of the Galaxy and then the part 2. And it turns out that years ago on Twitter, he made fun of, it's really disgusting. I'm not going to describe it here on Good Family Radio, but it's disgusting garbage that he tweeted out. It's the kind of stuff that if you're a Republican, you're going down and you're never coming back. You'll never be seen from or heard of again. You're going into the private life and no one's going to hire you. You're just gone. He tweeted that kind of stuff out. He joked around about, sex with kids. It's gross. So when the tweets surfaced, because they were connected with a conservative organization that kind of said, hey, if you're going to be passing out, Me Too smackdowns, here's one for him. He's prominent, and here's what he tweeted, and he's never apologized for it. Well, so they do that. They take this look. They're, kind of upset about what they found. And after an internal investigation, basically, I guess they verified if the tweets were true, then they let him go. Well, now the actors on the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, all of the actors in that franchise, including Chris Pratt, are saying, this is unfair. He needs to be brought back. Really? So do we need to bring everyone back who's had anything wrong in a tweet? Because I don't see how he gets brought back and Roseanne Barr is still blacklisted in Hollywood. I mean, what's worse, comparing someone to the hairstyle of someone on Planet of the Apes or joking around about kids and sex? I mean, which I'll leave it to you to make the decision. I know where I am on that. If it's going to be good for the goose, it has to be good for the gander. And I'm ready to see someone adequately justify what we're discussing here. This dude has been let go by his production company because they don't want to be associated with those kinds of tweets. Now, admittedly, and we've seen this happen as well, you can have someone have tweets that, surface and they say, oh, wow, I don't agree with those tweets anymore. I'm going to delete them. And, those jokes were made in poor taste, or those tweets were made, in the heat of the moment, the anger, whatever. I'm deleting them. I apologize. And that's it. And you move forward. The organization chooses to move forward, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's what happens is really between the person in question and the organization. But I'm not down for the double standard. I'm not here for the double standard that says if you're a conservative or you're a Trump supporter, you have to be vilified into non-existence. But if you're just regular old liberal, then, you get to come back. No. What I want to see them do is say, you know what? We are going to bring him back. And we're also going to rethink what we've done with Roseanne Barr. There is no way that that new television show that they're planning on launching called The Conners is going to make it. There's no way that show's going to make it. And we all know why. So why not bring her back? Or allow her to have her own vehicle, her own program that's just her, build a new cast around. In other words, she still gets to work and earn a living. It's either or. It's not going to be, well, we're going to bring the Guardians of the Galaxy guy back, but we're not going to bring back Roseanne Barr. We're not going to give her a chance to work. I hate what she tweeted, but that's not the point. The point is not, is she supposed to be banished for life for a tweet? This needs to be taken into perspective. It needs to be brought back down from the emotionally laden, out of control, crazy rhetoric and put back into a place of normalcy. Anyone can make a mistake. Anyone can tweet something offensive or crack a joke that's just absolutely horrific. Now what? Do we vilify people into oblivion, or do we say, in this case, the person's apologized, we've deleted the tweets, and we're moving forward? I mean, please help me understand. That's what we're supposed to be doing here, is understanding and same treatment for everybody. Equal under the law, I would say, but there is no law about what you can tweet. Really. So now, speaking of online social media, we've got Facebook. Now, you know, they've lost 19% of their total value. On their last earnings call, they had a really difficult go talking about the different things that they're having to do to try to combat fake news, try not to have their platform operate as an arm of the Democrats, all the different things, the Cambridge Analytica, data breaches, scandals, whatever. So they're actually having this huge news story out today about a number of accounts that they've deleted that it turns out were really churning out some serious social media action, getting viral posts and everything. They've identified an ongoing effort to influence the U.S. midterm elections using inauthentic accounts and pages on the social media network. The quote from them, from their blog post, is that we're still in the very early stages of our investigation and don't have all the facts, including who may be behind this, but it's clear that whoever set up these accounts went to much greater lengths to obscure their true identities than the Russian-based Internet Research Agency has in the past. And so one of the pages that they have is called Resistors. And this page has been found to be fake. It's a fake page, and the stories that are on there are meant to inflame the passions of the people who like the page. It says, if Trump wants to beat Barack Obama's Twitter record for most liked tweet, he need only tweet 2 words, I resign. And so this is a resistor page. They think that it's been put up by Russians trying to influence the election. The company has stepped up their efforts to ferret out fake accounts. And here's another one. This page is called Black Elevation. Black Elevation runs ads. It says, join Black Elevation team. We're hiring. Position event coordinator part-time. Salary is paid equally in 2 parts, one before the event, one after. This picture that they posted, it's a meme, had 50 comments and 291 shares, 1,200 reactions, so it's a viral post. It's Black Elevation, and it has a picture of a man sitting on a wicker chair, and behind him is a triangle. He's holding a rifle and what looks like some sort of it's some sort of arrow, and he's holding it, and it says Black Elevation, but it's a white guy. Facebook said starting last week, they identified 8 pages and 17 profiles on their main social network, 7 accounts on Instagram that violated their rules. They shared their findings with the U.S. law enforcement, Congress, and other technology companies, and they said they're letting the public know ahead of a real protest the fake accounts had planned and coordinated in the nation's capital for next week. So the fake accounts were actually organizing protests, which is the same thing that they did during the 2016 election cycle. They actually had fake Trump pages organizing protests where real Trump supporters would show up and hold a rally. But it was organized by a fake organization that was actually a part of the Internet Research Agency, which is a front group for the Russians. It says here, resistors. Millions of indigenous people died during the conquest of America. History is history, but if we want integrity and equality, we have to erase these bloody memories and start over. Congratulations, LA. LA cancels Columbus Day. This post is from September 1st of 2017. So this page has been up and running. It has 290,000 likes, and Facebook's just now realizing these aren't real people. These people aren't who they say they are. So, yay, Facebook. You finally figured out that there's some fake Russian accounts putting up stuff. So here's what you need to watch for. I'm giving you this news right here. It's hot off the presses right here on the show, and I just shared with you what's going on there. Now, there are some other pages that are in the story that are much more like, what would we call them? Like troll accounts. Like they're troll pages. They're pages that are intentionally nonsensical. They don't make any sense. Which part of this story do you think the mainstream media is going to focus on? The fact that they're putting out pages that are geared towards Democrats? Because remember, during last election season, they put out pages geared towards Trump supporters. Most of the work that the Russians did on online social media, which coincidentally was found to have almost zero impact on the election, was done towards Trump supporters. But now they're actually targeting Democrats. So should we listen for all of the people at CNN to start talking about how the Russians are targeting the Democrats? No, because then that would mean that we would say, oh, they're targeting you. That means you're in cahoots with them. That means all Americans are in cahoots with the Russians because the Republicans are already in cahoots and now the Democrats are in cahoots. So everyone's a Russian spy, which means no one is. They're not going to do that. They can't go back on what they've said. They've tried to connect the Russian attempt to do all of this with Donald Trump, and so they're going to keep doing that. They're going to focus on these pages, whatever they can focus on that connects it to Donald Trump, and they're going to ignore all the rest of this. It's pretty amazing that this shows and proves what we've been saying here on this show all along, that the Russians don't care which candidate wins the election. They've never cared. They only care about dividing us so that we're weaker because they can't handle strong, unified America as an international power. Unstoppable unless we're divided and hating on each other. So that's hour one. We'll be back with hour two right after these important messages from onenewsnow.com. Find me online at stacyontheright.com and keep it here.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Hughes. U.S. officials confirmed to Fox News North Korea continues missile production inside the Hermit Kingdom, despite a pledge to denuclearize following a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un last month. Greg Palcott has more.
Fox News confirming reports saying that North Korea is busy building more missiles. A U.S. official telling Fox, quote, "It is business as usual at a factory near Pyongyang that builds ICBMs capable of reaching the U.S. Analysis of satellite photography showing, quote, "There's no evidence of a halt of work." The missiles we're talking about are the long-range type, launched 3 times last year in test firings that could reach as far as the east coast of the U.S. This comes after last month's summit involving President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, during which Chairman Kim pledged to work towards denuclearization, and amid a meeting today at the DMZ between North and South Korean generals trying to calm things down there. In London, Greg Balcott, Fox News.
A border enforcement group says it is the height of hypocrisy for the founder of Facebook to lobby against a border wall to protect American citizens while receiving a $10 million a year tax break to pay for his own security. Chad Groening has more.
Mark Zuckerberg has been under fire in recent days for his apparent bias against conservatives on his very popular website. And Zuckerberg helped found Forward U.S., a mass immigration advocacy group that is lobbying hard for an essentially borderless country. While Zuckerberg vehemently opposes President Trump's border wall, he has no qualms about protecting himself at the taxpayer's expense. The cost of protecting Zuckerberg and his family is $27,000 a day and is subsidized by a $10 million annual pre-tax allowance that enables him to delay or perhaps avoid altogether in the long run paying taxes on that money. Ira Melman is a spokesman for the Federation for American Immigration Reform.
His house in Palo Alto, California. He has a vacation home in Hawaii. Both of those are protected by walls and other security. And yet, when it comes to the security of the country, we should just allow people in at will. And there's obviously hypocrisy, and it just indicates the complete disconnect between what's good for him and what is good for everybody else who doesn't happen to have assets worth $70 billion.
I'm Chad Groening.
School choice is likely to be a hot topic in Georgia's governor's race, which pits conservative Republican Brian Kemp against liberal Democrat Tracy Adams. More from Bob Kellogg.
Kemp and Abrams couldn't be farther apart when it comes to school choice. Kemp wants to expand school choice in the state. Abrams is vowing to repeal the tax credit scholarship program. Tommy Schultz of the American Federation for Children says that's a poor campaign strategy.
Stacey Abrams is fully bought and paid for by the teachers' unions and clearly wants to do away with the tax credit scholarship program, which would take 14,000 children out of the school of their parents' choice. So that'd be an incredibly unpopular move politically.
Schultz says he doesn't purport to be a political prognosticator, but he says historically in Georgia, candidates who support school choice usually come out on top.
We're confident ultimately that the candidates who come out with strong records on supporting parental school choice in Georgia and who want to expand those options for more families, I think they're going to be victorious.
Kemp or Abrams will be replacing Republican Governor John Nathan Deal, who was first elected in 2011. I'm Bob Kellogg.
And finally, so much for the Second Amendment. Hundreds of firearms have been confiscated from owners in Florida under a new state law.
More than 450 cases have been filed with Florida courts ever since the state passed a law allowing mental health workers, physicians, or law enforcement to seek to remove a person's firearms if they believe them to be a danger either to themselves or others. The law calls for hearings on the matter, and the judge can decide to remove a person's firearms for 60 days before the person can petition for their return. Broward County, where Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High is, has filed nearly 90 of these petitions since March. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
My name's Tim, I'm 17. All the male role models in my life did drugs, so it's no wonder I ended up just like them. I was down to 90 pounds when I came to Teen Challenge, but now I'm healthy and drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
You spoke a bit about Iran today and your discussions, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what you think Iran needs to do to reduce some of the tensions. And you've met with the leaders of North Korea and Russia. Are you prepared also, are you willing to meet with President Rouhani, and under what conditions? And have there been any preliminary discussions about something like that?
I'll meet with anybody. I believe in meeting. The Prime Minister said it better than anybody can say it. Speaking to other people, especially when you're talking about potentials of war and death. and famine and lots of other things. You meet. There's nothing wrong with meeting. We met, as you know, with Chairman Kim, and you haven't had a missile fired off in 9 months. We got our prisoners back. So many things have happened so positive. But meeting with people, I had a great meeting, in my opinion. Of course, the fake news didn't cover it that way, but I had a great meeting with President Putin of Russia. I think it was a great meeting in terms of the future, in terms of safety and economic development and protecting Israel and protecting everybody. I thought it was a great meeting.
Wow. So I totally welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. Hour 2, Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Fascinating to hear the president say he'll meet with anybody. So he's not ruling it out. In other words, it's always worth it to take the meeting. Remember when I said that? I'm glad to see we're of the unimind on this issue. It doesn't hurt him to meet. It doesn't hurt to sit down and hear what they have to say. They're pretty ticked off. They've actually sued the president in some world court, international court. I'm not sure exactly what kind of court it is. They're doing that because they want to stop the sanctions. And so they know they can't do it here in this country because the sanctions are coming from Congress and the President of the United States. So they're planning on doing this international court to sue the president and stop him from implementing these sanctions. I don't know exactly how that would be binding. Like, how can an international court bind the United States of America from implementing sanctions? Like, how would they do that? Yeah, I don't see that happening. I guess they can always say that they want us to stop the sanctions or that they don't agree with the sanctions, but what other thing would they do? Like, what can they make us do? I'm just wondering. So he had a little bit more to say about the possibility of meeting with Iran, and he tied a lot of other news of the day type issues into the conversation, his answer to the reporter on that question. It's number 3.
Great meeting with NATO. I just explained NATO. Hundreds of billions of dollars more money will be paid into NATO, the coffers of NATO, and much already has. So I believe in meeting. I would certainly meet with Iran if they wanted to meet. I don't know that they're ready yet. They're having a hard time right now. But I ended the Iran deal. It was a ridiculous deal. I do believe that they will probably end up wanting to meet, and I'm ready to meet anytime they want to. And I don't do that from strength or from weakness. I think it's an appropriate thing to do. If we could work something out that's meaningful, not the waste of paper that the other deal was, I would certainly be willing to meet.
Do you have preconditions for that meeting?
No preconditions, no. They want to meet, I'll meet. Anytime they want. Anytime they want. It's good for the country, good for them, good for us, and good for the world. No precondition.
So I think that's great on his part to say that publicly. Now, Rouhani has also publicly said, he's the leader of Iran, he's not going to meet. He said, I'm not meeting. I'm not going to meet with him. I think they're hoping for some kind of, help from this UN or this international world court. They're hoping that court will be able to help them. I just think it's interesting that in the face of the sanctions that we've put on and in the face of the devastation to their currency, it's news today that their currency has fallen again, and just everything that's happening, it's almost baffling that they just will not simply give up on having a nuclear weapon. None of us other countries around these parts, around any parts, are interested in taking over Iran. There's just no reason for us to want to. So why are they so bent on having a nuclear weapon? Because they can use that to terrorize the United States. So why would we want to work with them on helping to bring that about? That's what was so fascinating about Donald Trump's accusations against Barack Obama for his kowtowing to world leaders, that Obama never really answered the criticism. He insulted Donald Trump. Hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. He said a lot of things that were unprovable about our international relations, but he never answered why he was so soft on Iran. What was his thought process surrounding that? He never did say. So it's interesting. I want to pivot over to a story that's over at the Daily Caller. And this is an example of how, and we talked about this a little bit in the first segment, this is an example of how the Democrats are selling one thing, but what you're actually getting is nothing like what you've been sold. You've been told that illegal immigrants, for the most part, are law-abiding citizens and that there's nothing to worry about. The fact that they're here is just not a big deal, and that there are only 11 million of them. There have been 11 million of them in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013, going all the way back to 2004 when that number first surfaced. So if Americans thought there were 30 million illegal immigrants here, there'd be a different conversation. Congressional districts would be shifting. Americans, even on the left, would have a little something to say. But as long as they can continue to force feed you this 11 million number, then, because, think about it. If there are more illegal aliens in this country than there are black people, don't you think that would be a concern? Don't you think black people would have a problem with that? Don't you think a lot of people would have a problem with that? Even legal immigrants are against the wholesale acceptance of people who are here illegally, because the ones who came here legally had to work so hard to get in. They don't want to see it wasted. They don't want to see it cheapened and made into something that I guess you just didn't really need to go through all that. You could have just come here illegally. So you've got the Portland police refusing to help ICE agents who called 911. I know you're probably thinking I didn't just say that, but that's what it says here. Portland, Oregon police refused to respond to 2 911 emergency calls from ICE employees inside their officers where violent protesters held week-long demonstrations. So there's this union called National Immigration and Customs Enforcement Council that represents ICE employees. They wrote a cease and desist letter to Mayor Ted Wheeler asking him to ensure the police enforce the law equally and protect innocent people. Your current policy forbidding Portland law enforcement agencies from assisting employees of ICE who request law enforcement assistance while at or away from work is a violation of the United States Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. Demonstrators, some affiliated with the domestic terrorist organization Antifa, set up a tent city outside the ICE offices. After setting up the camp, they became violent and incited violence several times. Every person in law enforcement knows there are few things as dangerous or as unpredictable than an angry mob, Chris Crane, president of the National Union W Week, reported on Monday. No one could have responded quickly enough to protect our employees who were trapped inside this building. All of this because the mayor of Portland has a beef with the president of the United States. This lawlessness is coming to you courtesy of the Democrats. The activists were able to get the government to shut down the Portland ICE offices June 20th, but the employees were able to return to work on July the 3rd. The Occupy ICE camp was officially shut down July 25th after a month of demonstrations. They infected the area so much, the mayor called it a biohazard. Do you remember the Occupy Wall Street tents where people were getting raped and there was fecal matter and it was just like a third world country, and that's where these protesters were living? Now, the activists are actually there to protest Donald Trump's enforcement of current immigration laws, but these are the same laws that were in place when Barack Obama was the president, and they didn't protest then. Portland police did not respond to a request for comment from the Daily Caller News Foundation. Of course they didn't. I mean, I just cannot. I can't believe that. I can't believe that they would allow people to be harmed in order to facilitate this illegal alien sanctuary city policy. People who are at work, who they have to be there because they work there because they want to earn a living so they can make their mortgage payments and their car payments and whatnot. And this is they call 911, they can't get any help. Somebody should set up a GoFundMe to get them some private security. Or Congress could vote to give ICE offices private security. You know how much I hate expanding government. But if they're going to operate in places that are sanctuary cities, maybe they need some private muscle to protect them from these. I mean, this is just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. You want to weigh in on this? I'll let you call in. Call in. Tell me what you think about it. 866-963-2037. It's 866-963-2037. Also, as we're going out of this segment, I want to also make the announcement, of course, we've been talking about a little bit here on the show. Next week, we are going to be picked up the first hour of the program on American Family Radio. So that starts on Monday. So it's an expansion of the show. It's an honor and a privilege for me, and I'm so excited about it. And we are really pumped up about having the first hour on there as well. We'll still be here. I've had some people comment. Nothing really changes. If you listen on YouTube or if you watch the live streams on Periscope or on Facebook, you're not missing anything. Nothing changes. Everything will be the same. There'll just be more stations on which the show is broadcast live for the first hour. So that's really exciting. And I'm pumped up about it. It's going to be great. And we have some wonderful guests planned for next week. And so you're going to get a chance to just have more of the same program with awesome guests and commentary and your calls all coming at you right here from 2 to 4 p.m., 2 to 3 p.m. over at AFR. It'll be fun. So after we get back from this break, we're going to be talking to Brittany Hughes. She works over at MRCTV, Media Research Center Television. And we're going to be talking about the Ocasio-Cortez interview that happened at The Daily Show on Trevor Noah's show. You know, he's not an American, by the way. He's from South Africa. And he's in this country to make jokes and poke fun at fully half of the American populace, the half of us who believe in conservatism and individual liberty and the Bible and God and, you know, religious freedom. And so she went on his program and she made some really outrageous claims about the American workforce. So Brittany Hughes is going to come on and talk to us about that. And we're going to use statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau and, information that is actually accurate to talk about Ocasio-Cortez's claims that she made while she was on the show. So we'll be doing that right after the break. So we mentioned a little bit ago about the president saying that he was willing to shut the government down to get the border enforcement. And I just can't stress it enough. And you guys know, I know for some people who, you know, you don't watch as much television, it is easier to get through a book. But if you can't see yourself sitting down and slogging through 350, 400 pages, doing an audible read, which means the book is read to you by the author. It's usually the author who reads it. It means you can go about your business and do everything you need to do during the day with that playing while you're working. And I have found it is the way that I can kind of keep up with my reading, not to the same level that I was doing before I had a radio show, but definitely I'm at least still working on and completing books. You got to get Adios America by Ann Coulter. I just can't stress to you enough how much information she has in there that if you're an American, you need to know this information. Not a white American, black American, none of that. I'm talking about if you are an American citizen, you need to hear this information that she has in this book. She's a fantastic author, and I hope one day to interview her on the program. But I definitely would say, out of all of her books, and I've read a few, this is the one. And every book is good that she has, but this is the one that you have to listen to. So we'll get into a little bit more of that, but specifically we're going to be talking to Brittany Hughes right after this. Stay there.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a health care plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, Think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345, *345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Jonah Goldberg talks about the miracle in his book, The Suicide of the West. The major focus of his book is on tribalism and populism, but he begins with a description and an explanation of the remarkable change in Western societies in the last few centuries. He says the miracle is about more than economics, but economics is the best way to tell the story of humanity's quantum leap out of its natural environment of poverty. People used to live on the equivalent of $1 or more a day. By the 18th century, human prosperity exploded in Europe and North America, and now many people in so many countries have been lifted out of poverty. A major reason for this dramatic change had to do with the change in the way human beings thought about the world and their place in it. Sure, there was trade and science and technology, but those things existed before the miracle. He argues that ideas brought about this change. So what were those ideas? Well, here are three. That the individual is sovereign, that our rights come from God, not government, and that the fruits of our labor belong to us. These are Christian ideas, but Jonah Goldberg doesn't give credit to Christianity. In fact, he begins his book with this statement: there is no God in this book. Instead, he assumes humans are merely an evolutionary product and eventually discovered the ideas that ushered in the miracle. He does give credit to John Locke. That would be the man who referred to the Bible over 1,000 times in his first treatise on government and invoked the Bible more than 300 times in his second treatise. Jonah Goldberg rightly reminds us that we are the beneficiaries of a change in the thinking that affected our political institutions and economic systems that brought about both liberty and prosperity. But I also think that Christianity deserves some credit for the miracle. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being with us today. Guess what? First-time guest on the show, but huge fan over here. And I'm speaking from the hostess chair. I am a huge fan of Brittany Hughes over at MRCTV. And so it's a pleasure to have her on the program. Brittany, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. That's very humbling. I appreciate that.
Well, I got to say, sometimes I watch your videos and I'm like, that's right. That's exactly. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I've been yelling about. Because when you're watching the TV, you notice a few things. And then what you guys do is you don't just notice it once or twice. You find every instance. You put it into percentages and then you kill us with it, with the facts and details. Because you kind of feel like, haven't I been hearing them talk about the same story for 2 or 3 days? Haven't they been telling the same lie for a week now? Isn't there any other news story for you to cover? And then your video will come out or something from the blog over there. And you're like, yes, I knew it. This is all they're talking about. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We actually, over at the Media Research Center, we try very, very hard to point out the things the media won't tell you. And you're exactly right. I mean, they just go over and over and over again with the same exact stories. You would think there'd be more happening in the world, or at least they could bring on a different perspective or something, but they don't. And I think from my point of view, as far as doing Reality Check, my web series online, I mean, at some point I have to say something or I'll just explode. And it's easier to just get it out there. But I hope that the videos are pretty informative and that they at least tell you something you didn't already know. So.
Exactly. And I do think that they do a great job of bringing the whole picture for people to kind of inform themselves. And I encourage you guys, go over to mrctv.org. And watch everything they've got over there. Check out the site. It's fantastic. I love going there and getting it's like a tune-up. You're like thinking, am I losing my mind? Or I go to your website, I'm like, nope, not losing my mind. Definitely not losing my mind. So, and one of those cases is something that you guys are covering right now. And it has to do with Democratic Socialist extraordinaire and purveyor of non-facts, 24 hours a day. And we've got this chick, Ocasio-Cortez. She's running for Congress. She's going to win because no Republican can win her district. And she's going to be there in Congress, and she's under the impression that there are 200 million workers in America, like actual employees, 200 million of them.
Yeah, speaking of losing your mind, I think what she's lost is a grasp on basic economics, which is interesting because she supposedly has a degree in economics. And so she made a whole bunch of these really kind of ridiculous claims on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, who, of course, is about as left-wing as you can get, and who is not going to challenge her on any of her erroneous claims, which I think is one of the biggest travesties here, is when you have these left-wingers who go on, whether it's a Comedy Central show or a news show, and they spew just blatant misinformation, no one ever seeks to correct them or, very rarely steps in and says, are you sure that's true? And case in point, one of the things that she said during this interview, which was riddled with so many factual errors that we don't have time to get into all of them right now, was the claim that 200 million Americans, which she claimed is 40% of the country, make less than $20,000 a year. So there are several things wrong with this claim. First of all, 200 million Americans is not 40% of the country. That would imply that there are 500 million Americans in the country, and there's not. There's about 330 to 340 million, actually. But also, what was interesting is when she claims that 200 million Americans make less than $20,000 a year, according to government data in the Census Bureau, there's only about 157 million Americans in the workforce as of June. So I don't know where she came up with this magical, imaginary 43 million other people who supposedly make less. I mean, the numbers here are so staggeringly off. You can't even really blame it on a misspeaking or, maybe she was off by a little bit or something. She's claiming that 200 million Americans, which is more than the actual workforce, make less than $20,000 a year. That's simply not true. But again, Trevor Noah is never going to correct her on that, never going to come back at her on that. You're going to have people who aren't going to do their research who are actually going to believe it, and what's worse, vote on it.
And so, Brittany, let's work through this step by step. Now, my listeners are amazing people, very intelligent, and really able to analyze information. But let's just kind of talk amongst ourselves, if you will, about the probability of someone who thinks there are close to 500 million Americans or doesn't care how many Americans there are and just tosses out numbers wildly like this, about her being able to accurately tell Americans what kind of policies, specifically those that have to be paid for by the taxpayers, we should embark upon once she gets into Congress. Like, what's the likelihood of her doing that well if she can't even figure out what the accurate workforce numbers are for Americans?
Well, I think this raises really, really big questions, and not just when it comes to this one individual candidate, but also just when it comes to people on the left who spew blatant misinformation. Look, Bernie Sanders was doing it long before this young lady showed up and won her primary. And it's bizarre to the point of we're no longer debating ideas. We're no longer debating, here are the facts, here's what I think that we should do with them, versus here's what you think we should do with them. We're talking about basic facts like how many people are physically in the country, how many dollars and cents we have to do all the things that you're saying we want. This Daily Show interview, and people can go back and watch it for themselves, it was riddled with so many factual errors that it's impossible to go through and call them all out right now. But she has a fundamental misunderstanding of how the budget works. She has a fundamental misunderstanding of how much tax revenue we can generate and where we can get it from. There seems to be this misunderstanding among Democratic socialists that, if we just tax all the billionaires a whole bunch more, that'll pay for all of our hopes and dreams that we want out there and make everybody feel better. It has been proven time and time again that you could tax the top 1%, 100% of their income, and it would not cover something like Bernie Sanders' proposal for Medicare for all. It wouldn't even touch it. But again, when you can go on a network show and just view this and nobody calls you on it, nobody fact checks you on it, and everybody just runs with it, people will vote according to what you told them, not according to what the actual facts are. It's a scary thing that she doesn't know her information. It's an even scarier thing that we do have a predominance of voter ignorance in this country where people will vote based on misinformation. Again, vote Republican, vote Democrat, I don't really care, but at least make sure your information is correct and that you know what you're voting for and that it's true.
And so I have nothing against debating the facts, having the issues, but we're talking about Trevor Noah's show has an enormous audience. And I've watched it before. He does have this knack for cracking these, wise little jokes. They're not based in facts. And he really doesn't understand the Constitution of this country. He's ignorant of the American ethos, the kind of personality that Americans have that is so different from every other country. He has our way of telling jokes down and of comedic humor and sarcasm. He's got that down, but he doesn't understand what Americans are like. He does have a segment down pat, like the hardcore leftist liberal Hollywood types, elites, people who, they kind of believe that they know best for everyone. He's got that down, but he has no idea what it's like to be here in Missouri, for instance, or anywhere that's not on the coast where liberals abound. And so it's interesting because his show is so huge and he has such an enormous reach, but the kind of misinformation that they're peddling, I mean, it should almost be a crime. And I'm all about free speech, but it should be a crime for the two of them to sit up and quote those kinds of numbers. Because what happens, Brittany, you or I will bump into someone who says, and you believe that you're supporting a party that lets America have 200 million people working for, this tiny pittance of amount of money per month. And if you say, well, actually, there can only be 155 million people in the workforce because that's how many people are in the workforce, according to our government, then they almost can't believe you because that is so, like what you've just said has completely blown apart any path forward in a conversation because they're dealing from a place of non-facts.
You're exactly right. If I had $1 for every single conversation that I've had to have with a leftist friend of mine where I've had to debunk a myth that they just grabbed off the internet or they heard somebody say and they just took it as gospel, I could retire right now.
Oh,
but
me too.
I think what you're getting to the heart of is something that we over at the Media Research Center really, really harp on. This is why we do what we do, and we do it every single day. And that is combating this liberal narrative that you don't just see it on The Daily Show. Okay, you're exactly right. That's incredibly dangerous because it's a Comedy Central show. I get that. But it is marketed as kind of, a type of news, and millions of people have watched this. But you also see it on the networks. You see it on CNN. You see it. I mean, we saw it several months ago when they were having David Hogg on every 5 minutes, and he was saying all kinds of erroneous things about the NRA. And, nobody was coming out and saying this is incorrect. This is factually incorrect. It's not even about your opinion or what you believe. It is factually incorrect. And nobody comes out and says that. And I find it interesting that for a left-wing news media that is so against Trump and against, whenever they say that he's, accusing them of fake news and, he doesn't agree with the facts and he doesn't actually know what he's talking about, it seems rather hypocritical when you allow guests to come on your show, spew a narrative that is blatantly false. I mean, again, all the way down to how many people are in the country kind of false. And nobody says a word. You're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You cannot accuse the right of fake news when you yourself are doing the exact same thing on a nightly basis. And so this is what we at the Media Research Center seek to do, is to ferret out truth from fact and tell you, okay, this is what the media is saying, but this is why this is wrong. You can make up your mind what you believe. We're not here to tell you your opinion or how what policies you think should be enacted, but here are the basic facts. You cannot dispute these. They are going to be true whether you like it or not. 200 million people do not make less than $20,000 a year in America. That is simply not true.
In fact, let's give the information out because invariably someone in the audience has someone in their family who watches The Daily Show, and this is going to come up at dinner or at the ball game on the weekend, and you've got to have the facts to be able to refute this. You guys are reporting that according to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, only 28 million American households live on a total income of $25,000 or less. 25,000 or less, 28 million households. Nowhere near 200 million Americans. Not even close. Not even 10. Well, just barely a little over 10% of the false number, which is based on 500 and some million Americans. I mean, it's just so ludicrous.
It's absolutely insane. And, I want to also point out that when we're talking about households who live with that income or less, we're also talking about non-working dependents. But you get even farther away from Ms. Cortez's claim when you start saying, okay, by the way, even by generous standards, to get even close to your number, we're having to count, children, the elderly, the retired, parents who might live with their kids. You're having to rope in a lot of people, not just those who are making $20,000 or less every year. So even when you try to help her out by lumping in some other people, you don't even get close.
And not only that, but if you are living on 28 million, or I'm sorry, if you're living on 25,000 or less and you're a family of four, you are in the government's social safety net. The American taxpayers are already subsidizing your income. We are providing you with WIC or food stamps or both. SNAP cards, you're getting housing assistance in the form of a housing voucher or some kind of check paid directly to your landlord. I mean, when you're in that area where you're not a single person and you earn $25,000 or less, any dependents present whatsoever, all of a sudden, this isn't about what you're making. It's about you supplementing what the government is giving. And on this program, we have many times run down the list of the best states to live in. Where in Hawaii, you make over $68,000 a year if you're on welfare. If you receive and accept all of your benefits, it's $68,000 a year. In Missouri, it's $54,000. And these numbers are from like 3 or 4 years ago, last reportable statistics. There even as someone who makes less than $25,000 a year, once you add in the benefits that they get from our social safety net, they're not making $25,000 a year. This is the best place on the planet to be poverty stricken because you're suddenly not poverty stricken if you're doing it right.
I mean, that's incredibly true. And, and I find it interesting, another part that Ms. Cortez was kind of touting, again, completely uninterrupted and unchallenged on The Daily Show, was this idea that, well, if we can just get the billionaires to pay their fair share, and she used Warren Buffett as an example, which, just as liberal as the day is long. And he has often made the claim that, well, if I simply paid as much as my secretary, if I paid the same percentage she does, then if everybody who made as much as me did that, then we would be completely in the clear and we could take care of so many more people. To people like that, I say, you know what? Maybe you don't know this. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. And maybe some of your listeners don't know this either. There is a donate button on the IRS website. You are welcome to go donate your hard-earned money. If you happen to be a millionaire or a billionaire who thinks that you are not paying enough in taxes, by all means, please go donate. You're welcome to. You can't take advantage of corporate loopholes and then complain about the corporate loopholes. If you want to pay more, the United States government would be more than happy to take your personal check. I guarantee you. But again, we could tax every single person who made that much 100% of their money, and it would not come close. I mean, a new study just showed that this Medicare for all thing that Bernie Sanders wants and that Ms. Cortez is sponsoring, and, Medicare for all would ultimately end up costing the United States government and the taxpayers $33 trillion over the next 10 years. That almost doubles the entire budget of the United States per year.
Right. The whole thing. Everything. It's just amazing. But this is why you have so much work to do. This is why you'll never be out of a job, because as long as the liberals are still controlling the media, you'll have stuff to document and debunk, and you do so fantastically well. Thank you, Brittany Hughes, MRCTV. Fantastic. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
All right. Talk again soon. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
In our 30-plus years together, we've learned 3 things about our marriage. First, just because we have intentionally supported and encouraged each other doesn't mean we have agreed about every decision or always understood what the other was thinking. Second, our differences as husband and wife have actually made our marriage stronger and better balanced. And third, we know that our painful memories, which had been forgiven, have been forgotten as well. swept away by the sands of time and the gentle breath of the Lord's forgiveness.
Don't forget that God will walk alongside your marriage every step of the way. He'll help you learn about a love that will last forever and how to overcome life's obstacles together.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
There was a time where I was in the middle of doing something, and the Lord just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to buy my wife some flowers. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't done it in a while. And I walked into the door of our little small apartment, and I had the flowers in my hand, and my wife's eyes connected with mine. Her eyes just welled up with tears. And I immediately started thinking, what's wrong? What happened? What's going on? And she said, Abe, I've been wanting some flowers, but I know what our financial situation is, and I didn't want to be an additional burden on you because I know things are tight now. And man, it was just a moment where my wife and I just fall more deeply in love with the Lord and more deeply in love with one another.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk.
By relying on Him. Oh, God. Oh, Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
From America's election headquarters.
We're under 100 days until the midterm elections in November, and the balance of power is up for grabs.
Our priorities is to make sure that we not only re-elect, but that we expand Republican majorities on Capitol Hill.
Vice President Mike Pence telling Fox Business Network's Maria Bartiromo the current administration has faced an unprecedented obstruction by Democrats in Congress, citing tax cuts as an example.
It's amazing to think in a week that this economy grew by more than 4%, which was a national goal the president articulated during the campaign in the fall of 2016. And we're on track for 3% growth. Not one single Democrat in Congress voted for those historic tax cuts.
Democrats would need a net gain of 2 seats to control the Senate and a net gain of 23 seats for the House. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
I think the only reason that we're moving forward with North Korea is that President Trump convinced China and North Korea he was serious about them giving up their nuclear program. And in return, they'll have security and prosperity. Having the remains returned to the United States is much appreciated by the families and the country as a whole. But we're looking for complete, irreversible, verifiable denuclearization. I fear that North Korea and China are trying to run the clock out. China has pulled North Korea back because we're in a trade dispute with China. So if I were President Trump, I'd keep the pressure on. I'd be willing to walk away. And the only way you're going to get a deal that really matters is to convince China and North Korea we'll use the military option to stop their nuclear program if we have to.
Wow, that's Lindsey Graham coming in hot on one of the programs, talking about how he sees the next steps moving forward. And of course, this is audio that was created. He made these comments before the announcement that came out in the news that North Korea is back to generating and producing their ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which those missiles are able to reach the mainland of the United States. And so this is definitely a defiant act on Kim Jong-un's part. And it calls into question the seriousness with which he approached the meeting that he already had with President Trump and whether or not he really meant anything by it. And maybe, you know, playing devil's advocate here, maybe the reason he's doing that is because he felt like, hey, I met with him and I've returned remains to him, and now I need to show him that I'm not completely under his thumb. Or maybe this is what he planned to do all along. Or maybe he's being egged on by the Chinese. You know, we could play the maybe game all day. Those are some of the, I think, top of mind possibilities for us. But in the end, it's something that he's doing that we know he's doing it. And he has to also know that, you know, we can lay a missile or two on him as well. We do have our troops in South Korea, and we do have those war games that the president put on hold, which I've been seeing stories over at the Free Beacon about the real need for the war games. It's the practice for real war. And so our troops get a lot of training that they can't get just, you know, kind of swanning around in their jobs. They need the real world training exercises that enable them to be very effective and functional during a wartime operation. This is the worst case scenario, obviously. We don't want to be at war. We don't want to be at war with Korea. We just don't. We don't want them firing hundreds of rockets into Singapore and South Korea, where we have millions of Americans living, and we have also our allies there. We don't want to see any of our allies harmed in any way. But we are also dealing with a very real possibility that this man will not only create these intercontinental ballistic missiles and do all of these things, but that he's never going to stop doing it. So as you just heard there, Lindsey Graham is saying that Trump should tell the World Trade Organization to enforce the trade rules on China or will quit the WTO. Now, interesting that he would say that. He also says we need a deadline on denuclearization from North Korea, because without the deadline, there's no actionable point at which we can do anything. And that's number 5.
Do you think that the North believes that now, or has it been emboldened by new strength coming from China?
I think China is undercutting President Trump when it comes to North Korea. But I think North Korea believes that President Trump will not allow them to develop a capability to hit the American homeland with a nuclear weapon. He has set his policy in stone, complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Iran is watching. Russia is watching. The only way we'll get there is to put a deadline on this. President Trump said he wanted this to happen in his first term. I see the timeline slipping. That worries me. But the only way we've made any progress with North Korea is because Trump has been strong in the eyes of North Korea and China, and you have to stay strong. I don't want a war with North Korea, but if there's going to be one, it's going to be in China's backyard, not America's backyard, and I hope China understands that.
So it would be over their way, not over our way. Now, their answer might be, well, it'll be over your way because we'll send some missiles over your way, but that's mutually assured destruction. And I mean, come on, we need better answers on this, and the only way to do that is for the president to kind of clearly outline exactly what he will and won't put up with. But that puts him in the territory that Barack Obama so famously entered into without the wherewithal to follow through, and that's the red line. Well, that's our red line in Syria, the use of chemical weapons. And then Assad was like, I'll see your chemical weapons, and I'll raise you even more chemical weapons used on my own people because I don't think these people are loyal to me. Now we've got dead women and children. Now what you going to do? And Obama did nothing, and he was like, I'll see you. You're nothing. Hold my beer. I'm going to put something else out there. And he killed more people. So it is a dangerous game to play, to actually put out there what it is that you will or won't accept. But hopefully the president has other plans, other means of making something happen. And we have to wait and see what happens with that. We don't have any other option as far as what can we do. So I mentioned that there's this, there was a bit of information on what the president plans to do as far as going forward on the foreign policy front. And there's also a bit of information about what the federal government is doing with our money. Now, this is something that comes up a lot. And the government waste pig report just came out, and we're going to be going over that. I'm saving that for a little bit later in the week. But one of the things that was exposed is that the feds have been spending $402,236 comparing gender variant youth with cisgendered youth. Now, you might be thinking, why would they do that? Why do we care? Well, we don't care. But this is a way for someone who applied for a grant to get money, and they're able to get that money and use it on research. And when I say use it on research, the money doesn't all go towards the research facility, the actual data gathering, all that. It goes to hiring people and paying salaries for the individual researcher and whoever had the idea. And this is one way that people work the government over. So you've got what they call gender variant individuals who are experiencing an unprecedented moment in the spotlight of American culture. Why? Because liberals say that you need to pay attention to them. That's why. So the National Institutes of Health is spending over $400,000 for a study that compares gender variant kids with straight cisgender kids and cisgender lesbian, gay, and bisexual kids. Now, the first thing we need to know here is that this is child abuse, the way they keep labeling these kids and normalizing what is, because if you have kids, you know, kids will come up to you and say just the craziest things. They'll just say something and you're like, ooh, what made you say that? What happens in normal households is a normal parent will say, that's just not the way things work. And then you explain to the child how things actually work, and then the child is corrected and they go on about their business. Now, the idea may persist. They may come back and say, but I dreamed I was a boy, a little girl. Or a little girl might say, but I want to be a boy. And at that point, a parent can say with authority, because you are their parent, you are shepherding them. The child doesn't actually belong to you. God gives us our children. We raise them and have them in our lives for a time, and then they go on into adulthood, where these are people that, in the end, we are all God's creation. He tells us that we are to train up a child in the way that they should go, and we are to meditate on his word morning, noon, and night, and we're to keep our children with us during those times so that they can see us doing that and learn how to do it too. The chief way to become wise and also to prevent these kinds of weird, strange, whacked out thoughts is by staying in the word of God, by knowing what is approved, what is in God's word, and then you move forward in that. So you've got a kid who says, I want to be a boy. I don't really like being a girl. Well, okay, so what you mean is you don't like dresses and skirts and you don't like Barbie dolls. What do you like? You talk about what the child likes, and then you find a way forward for the child to do things that they like to do and participate in activities that they like, maybe playing with Legos, playing with trucks. Maybe they want to be able to have the hammer and, you know, the little Home Depot set that comes with a hammer and a fake drill, but the drill makes noise, and they want that set. They don't want the little cooking set, the little kitchen, the plastic set. So what's wrong with that? How many women carpenters out there? As a percentage, probably nowhere near how many men there are, but it's nothing wrong with a woman working in carpentry or other male-dominated fields. It's not about you changing what your child likes. It's about you letting them know that God created you female. You're a woman. You're a young woman. You're a girl. You are a gendered girl. And when you operate within what God has created, you will be blessed. So instead of going against what God has created, you can do things that you enjoy within the confines of yourself. So you don't have to not want to be a girl. You can still do things that you enjoy, but within the bounds of what God has created. What's so funny about all of this is that when kids go into therapy and they're with a therapist who wants to help them work through the gender dysphoria so that they can live a normal life and not mutilate themselves, what they find time after time after time, these therapists find that there was an incident, and it's not the parent's fault per se that the parents are doing something, but the parent has prioritized something that their son is doing, and the daughter wants that same type of recognition and acceptance from the parents. And so she says, well, I have to be a boy to get that. And in their mind, this is a child. They want to now be a boy because of that. When they get back with the child, they work their way back, and the child begins to share and talk about what's going on. They find that moment and they'll say, oh, well, your parents love you, and you don't have to be a boy for them to love you. They love you the same that in the same way that they love your brother. And they start working through that and getting the child to accept that knowledge. And then before you know it, you've got a fully functioning little girl who's not mentally ill, who's moving forward, and the son is also moving forward, and the parents are moving forward. And no one had to use a special bathroom or have their body pumped with hormones or blame America, blame white men. There's none of that going on. Just that little bit that I shared there, that therapists are able to help kids work through this. Certain states are now saying you can't help kids work through this. You just accept whatever they say. Well, what if your kid said, the only place I want to sleep at night is in the middle of the highway? Would you say, we need to change the highway system so that you can sleep in the middle of the highway? Or would you say, that's ludicrous. You're sleeping inside this house with the doors locked in your own room in the bed. You may sleep in bed with us occasionally, but you are going to sleep inside the house. It's similar to that, where if your child says something outlandish and they want to go do something that is absolutely ludicrous, we don't say as parents, oh, wow, The bed is wherever you place it, even if that's on a highway. The way people are saying gender is what's between your ears, not what's between your legs. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Of course it's what's between your legs. It's what's in your DNA, more specifically. Your gender is predetermined. It's in your DNA, and no amount of mutilation, hormonal therapy changes the genetic makeup. Caitlyn Jenner, still at the DNA level, a man. Also still a man because all the parts are still there. And still a man even if the parts weren't there. Mutilating the body doesn't change that. But this is what we've got going on. So why would they have this study? Why would they spend $400,000 on it? Because they're looking for something. If they say a study by the National Institutes of Health found that a University of Minnesota co-partnered study with the National Institutes of Health gives it validity because it's a government agency partnering with a university, found that when they surveyed 1,200 adolescents who identify as transgender, blah, and they can fill in the blank. That's why they're doing it. So the important thing for us is, what's so funny about this is it's going on. We have Donald Trump as the president. Everybody in the media is saying that any second now he's going to round up all of the homosexual people, all the transgender people. He's going to round them up and ship them out of America right after he gets done deporting all the blacks and all Hispanics and everything else. When the reality is this kind of madness is going on right under the Trump administration's purview. So this is an agenda that it doesn't just have feet or hands or legs. This agenda is a fully functioning train that is steamrolling through regardless of who is in power. These people want to find validation for this deviation from normal use of the human body, and they're using it to abuse children. And they're going to keep doing it no matter who the president is. We have to have someone in office, which I believe Donald Trump is the best one for that. You know, at this point, we've got someone good in there, but we have to have our Congress people saying this is not something we want to spend money on. Who controls the purse? There should be some kind of an audit that's being done where this kind of ridiculousness can't be done under the purview of taxpayer-funded research. It's ridiculous. It's wrong. And it's a waste of our money. But the purpose of it is that they want to find a way to blame somebody else for the fact that these transgender kids face higher levels of victimization, suicide, substance abuse, risky sexual behaviors compared to regular people who aren't mentally ill. Well, that's not a shock. All right. That's the show for today. We'll be back with more. Find me at StaceyOnTheRight.com.